Welcome everyone to the July 20th City Council work session. We are having our work session on the Envision Eugene Urban Growth Boundary Adoption Package Approach and Multifamily Housing Strategies. So, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn over to Robin and Terry.
Right. Thank you. Good afternoon, Council, Mayor. It's great to be back and talking about Envision Eugene. I'd like to frame up the conversation just a little bit before I turn it over to Terry to talk about more of the nuts and bolts. I think it's important that each time we talk about Envision Eugene, we ground ourselves in the fundamentals of what we're trying to achieve here, and especially why. So why is it important to adopt a new UGB? And the way I'd like to frame that is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? So Eugene is growing, and it's changing right now, and we don't have an adopted plan for our future. So the plan is really the bedrock of our laws and our investments, and if we're going to change those laws and make those investments with confidence and with purpose, we really need to know where we stand. So another problem is that we've already made a lot of commitments to other important issues to solve, and actually we have a lot of great ideas and concepts and the decisions that Council's already made and the direction you've already provided. And we just can't do that until we solve this one. So finally, we're legally bound to adopt a UGB, and our state legislature, who really represents the values of our community here in Oregon, has ordered us as a local community within Oregon to adopt a UGB, and that's one of the fundamentals of our state planning laws. Of course, as we all know, in 2007, the state legislature passed House Bill 3337, requiring Eugene to adopt its own UGB, and until we do that, we will continue to be out of compliance with state law. So Ed Moore is our local Division of Land Conservation and Development state agency representative that's going to be reviewing our UGB package. And he's here with us today, so if Council has any specific questions about the implications of that or related questions, he's here to answer those for us. So another important touchstone for grounding the conversation is to talk about where we've been. And Terry will walk you through a series of decisions that Council's already made in the past. But in the big picture, we've been working on this challenge for a number of years. And as you know, there have been a number of unforeseen challenges that have emerged in the middle of the process. And the good thing is we've kept our cool and we've been able to work through those challenges. And we're getting actually very close. And so what we're talking about today is really the last piece of the puzzle that we need to solve before we move on with the formal adoption process of the urban growth boundary. So a lot of good work already done. You'll recall the last challenge that emerged was in October, so we had a shift in thinking about our multifamily housing strategies and how we're going to achieve that inside the existing urban growth boundary. So our staff planning team and volunteers on the TRG have been working very hard for the past few months to come up with other solutions. And I wanted to take just a moment to explain a couple of sideboards and a couple of important filters that we've been using to think about those solutions. And one of those is obviously the framework of our state planning laws. And of course, we're required to adopt the UGB, and there are a number of rules about how that happens. And so the first question is, one of the most important questions is, does the solution actually solve the problem? And does it solve the problem in a way that's consistent with those regulations and rules? And the second filter that we're talking about here is, as I've mentioned, Council's made already quite a number of important decisions along the way. And those represent the values of the community and the policy direction that we're working within. And so the second important question is, through that filter, is, does the solution line up with the policies and the directions that we've already been given? So those are kind of the big picture filters and a little bit of background for us, and I'll pass it on to Terry.
So before you start, Terry, I just want to know when's the right time where we might ask Ed to talk about the implications.
Maybe after the presentation?
Okay.
Okay. So during the rest of the presentation, what I'll do is review the past decisions that you've made as a council related to Envision Eugene. There have been quite a few, so just a refresher. I'll talk a little bit about the key topics that we'll be engaging the public in a conversation about over the summer. The UGB expansion areas, our draft comprehensive plan policies, and then these multifamily options. And then the third piece of the meeting is really seeking your direction on those multifamily options and which ones to develop further, and direction to go implement the public engagement proposal that we've put before you. So as Robin said, we've been at this for a number of years, but in the big picture, we're pretty close to adopting the UGB. The House bill was back in 2007, and we've, as I said, made a number of decisions over the intervening years. So I'll walk you through a few of those here. Starting in 2008, the Council approved the Comprehensive Lands Assessment, and that was a baseline assessment of how much we would need to grow our UGB if we continued to grow the same way that we had grown in the past. So that was our baseline study. In 2012, you all made some key decisions with the draft Envision Eugene recommendation. The Council approved the 7 pillars, or community values, some key assumptions, including ones around population growth, job growth, and housing mix. And you directed staff to go forward with strategies and actions that would accommodate our needed homes, jobs, parks, and schools. So those included efficiency measures, expansion area analysis, and an area planning test in South Willamette. That was all contained in the 2012 document. With that direction, staff went forward and developed a series of efficiency measures and brought them to you for adoption. The first one in 2013 was downtown and mixed-use code amendments, and these made those kinds of development easier within the urban growth boundary and really added capacity to our city for job development. The next ones were about housing, and you approved residential redesignations. You changed the land use map for 200 acres from medium density to low density to add capacity for low density homes to the city in 3 parts of town. Then later in 2014, you adopted the Employment and Industrial Code and Zone Amendments, and these increased capacity for jobs through the E1 Campus Employment Zone in 3 parts of town and the E2 Mixed Use Employment Zone in the West Eugene MX corridor. And that added quite a bit of capacity and flexibility to job development in that corridor. And lastly, you adopted last summer the MUPTE Downtown Housing Incentive Program with a revamped set of criteria and a new advisory panel. These are all actions that are in place and have added capacity to our existing urban growth boundary. Then in October and November, as Robin mentioned, the council was having a discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. So in 2015, the council was brought a refined expansion proposal for jobs, parks, and schools in the Clear Lake area, and you voted to move that forward and also to add 35 acres for a community park in Santa Clara. Later in the year, you had a discussion about the UGB for housing, and you voted to keep using the current population forecast and for staff to set the UGB and begin our growth monitoring program, update our code for needed housing amendments, and to begin urban reserves planning. So that was last July. Then near the end of the year, while the council was discussing South Willamette zoning and livability issues, this is a reminder that the area planning strategy was being tested in South Willamette as a tool to accommodate more housing near corridors when coupled eventually with development incentives. Earlier this year, the council voted to withdraw the special area zone applications, and so we don't have an adopted area plan in place as a tool. Without that in place to adopt our urban growth boundary, we need to find another way to accommodate the remaining homes that we were planning to accommodate through special area zoning. So that's where we are. This, as Robin mentioned, will be the final piece of direction that we need from council before starting the formal adoption process. But we don't need that vote today. We're asking today for direction on which of these housing strategies to further develop with our technical work, and asking for your review of our public engagement plan to take all of the options out to the community and hear a full range of issues and concerns that people have with all of the different ways we could do this. So we'll come back to you, and in 2017 we will adopt the original. I'm confident. With that description of the many decisions behind you, we can look forward to what remains to be done. In order to adopt the UGB, we need to hear from people on these three main topics, and I'll touch on each of these in the following slides. The UGB location and the regulations that will apply in those expansion areas. The comprehensive plan policies and whether they guide growth consistent with our community values. And then whether these housing options provide the homes we need while protecting neighborhood livability. The first two are, this first one is pretty much a refresher because you've given us specific direction on these two expansion areas previously, and these maps have not changed. So the Clear Lake area is to provide 3,000 jobs for the Bethel area and for the city as a whole, Golden Gardens Community Park, and a future school site. And future planning in this area will aim to integrate business development with wetland mitigation and a green infrastructure system to handle stormwater. The Santa Clara expansion, shown in the green, is for 35 acres of community park for the Santa Clara neighborhood. Great. The Clear Lake area will get a new overlay zone, and it's based on the work of a committee made up of different boards and commissions, neighborhood representatives, and community groups. And they had two main goals in developing this draft: to protect the large employment sites that we have a demonstrated need for, and to address environmental justice issues that have come up in the community. The overlay is still in a draft form, and we do need additional public comments to improve it. This will be part of our summer engagement activities that I'll talk about a little bit later. Second main topic area is our comprehensive plan. You may recall that in order to adopt our UGB separate from Springfield, we will need to amend the Metro Plan. We've been working on pulling certain policies out of the Metro Plan and migrating them into a new Eugene-specific comprehensive plan. And our goal with that is to adopt only those that are necessary to adopt the UGB or implement a high priority council action. So the first three there are required to go with the UGB, and growth monitoring has been a really important community and council value from the beginning of Envision Eugene. So those are the policies that you'll see. Oh, and now we're going to pause and show you a video that we've put together to explain to folks about the UGB. And Sarah Allison over there is going to pull it up for us. This will frame the conversation about the homes. This is our website, and the video's right here at the bottom. There we go.
Eugene is a great place to live, and people know it. We expect Eugene to grow by 34,000 people by 2032, which is roughly the same kind of growth we've experienced for the last 20 years. With these additional residents, we will need places to work, parks where we can relax, schools where we can learn, and homes where we can live. By planning ahead for this growth, we can make sure we preserve all that we love about Eugene while making improvements that are important to our community. The next step is adopting our very own urban growth boundary, the area around the city identified for growth. Envision Eugene, our community's plan for how we'll grow over the next 20 years, includes adding land for 2 new parks, a school, and space for jobs. The last piece in the puzzle is housing. Eugenians have said that we should accommodate the anticipated 15,000 total new homes within our existing urban growth boundary if possible. And we have land across Eugene to do this. We just need to find space for the final 1,600 homes. With already existing incentives and programs, about 1,000 of these homes can't fit in Eugene's downtown, where higher densities make sense. That means we only need to find space for about 600 homes. We as a community are exploring several options to provide space for these remaining homes. We know Eugenians care deeply about their community, and we need your help to get it right. We want to hear from you before City Council decides what to do. Let us know what you think. Here's how.
Sorry, the sound was kind of wacky, but you should be able to pull it up on the website if you want to watch it again. That's envisioneugene.org. So hopefully that explained what we're talking about with the multifamily housing that still needs to find a place within the urban growth boundary. We don't have a strategy for how to do that, and we need one in order to adopt the urban growth boundary. So we started this conversation with a list that included every strategy we could think of, and that's up on the screen. I know you can't read it, but it is in your packet, and the point is that it's pretty exhaustive and includes a couple of different categories of ways that we could fit more homes. Everything from changing some assumptions to adopting new code or plan amendment efficiency strategies to more incentives to expanding the UGB. Through our technical analysis, we found that a few of those options really rose to the top, and they hold the most promise for solving the problem while remaining consistent with previous council direction. The options don't upzone any property. They don't increase density in R1 single-family neighborhoods, and they don't increase maximum density in multifamily areas. They respond very intentionally to the issues that were brought up while we were discussing South Willamette. We call them Tier 1. Based on what we know are people's real concerns, these are the options that we think are the most workable to provide the 1,600 homes we need and have minimal impacts on neighborhoods. So there's two different kinds of housing we're really talking about, high density and medium density. And for the high density homes, these are taller apartments that you see most often in the downtown. We don't have to ask you to do anything extra because you've already put in place tools and programs for our downtown that will take care of these 1,000 homes. So medium density options, we have 2 on the table to take care of the remaining 600. So I'll walk through option A and option B, but in general they are option A, preserve that R2 zone, that's our medium density zone, for attached housing. And the effect of that action would be to raise the average density expected in our medium density zone around the city, enough to take care of that 600 home deficit. Or option B, increase the minimum density in that R2 zone, which would have the same effect. So I'll show you how they're different after I explain the high density strategy. So again, this is really building on our success with existing downtown tools and programs. 1,000 homes is a very reasonable assumption for what we can accommodate over 20 years. It's 50 homes per year for a 20-year period, continuing that success. And we have a lot of opportunity sites in the downtown, including the eWeb riverfront property. Okay, so on to the medium density housing. This is a map, this one, that shows our medium density land supply. And it's hard to see because we don't have that much vacant land and partially vacant land for medium density housing. They're shown in the orange blobs there around the community. And the question we asked ourselves was, is there a way to fit those 600 homes if we spread them around the city on existing lands that are already zoned for this purpose? Detailed version of this map is available on the website, broken up into quadrants for the city, and you can zoom in and really see what properties are on the inventory. When you zoom in a little bit and drop off the small lots, this is what's left. So this map shows only the vacant lots that are over half an acre in size. Both options that we'll be discussing today could be limited to apply to only bigger lots. And the reason that you might want to do that is it would allow small lots to continue to develop under current rules, and that would protect owners and developers who may already have a single-family house in the R2 zone or plans to build one. So only the bigger sites shown here on this map would be subject to the new rules if that's what you want to do. Okay, some visuals of option A and B. Option A is based on the form of housing. So if we say we're going to preserve the R2 zone for attached housing types, that means that the single-family house would go away as an option, and we wouldn't see any more single-family detached homes in the multifamily zone. They would continue to be allowed in our R1 single-family areas. Option B is a density-based option. So it would increase our current minimum density from 10 units per acre to 14 and leave the maximum the same. Make sense? What that would have the effect of doing is raising the average density across that zone, but all housing types would still be allowed. So if you are a developer or an owner who wants to build a single-family home, you would still be able to do that. You would just have to do it at a little higher density. So with that as the option, we asked ourselves, is that a feasible thing? Are there, what kinds of concerns would people have with this option? We know that density is a big concern for many people. And so we looked at what examples are there for 14 units per acre in single family around Eugene. And we did find some examples of R2 subdivisions that meet these densities. There are two shown here, Belterra and Mountain Terrace, which are both on County Farm Road in Northeast Eugene. Belterra is the top row, and it consists of single-family homes and duplexes and has an overall density of 15. And then Mountain Terrace is the bottom part, and it is entirely single-family homes and comes in at a net density of 14.3. So what do these homes look like? Belterra duplex is on the left and a Belterra single-family home on the right. And Mountain Terrace single-family home looks like this. That doesn't mean developers or owners would necessarily to choose this. We choose this to build single-family at a higher density. We have heard that it would be harder and that maybe it would constrain that option for folks who wanted to do that. So that is one thing that we've heard that we want to learn more about. So in summary, both options A and B here have the potential to solve the problem of the 600 homes. They avoid any upzoning or density increases in single-family neighborhoods, but we are at the point of needing community feedback to identify all the issues and concerns so that we can try to address them and bring you possible solutions or mitigations before you choose one of these options in the fall. Okay. So the next piece is about our timeline going forward and what we'll be asking and talking to the community about. Timeline is also in your packet, and I'll just call your attention to the box here. That's where we are at the City Council meeting, and the green bar up here is the public events calendar, which is in a lot more detail on our website in terms of neighborhood meetings, community events, and other meetings that are happening throughout the summer. Our goal is to focus our engagement on the three main topics that I covered in the presentation. So again, UGB, does the Clear Lake Overlay Zone do what it's supposed to do? Do the comprehensive plan policies guide growth in a way that we want them to? And do these housing options fit with the community and take care of the issue that we're trying to solve? Some of the tools or methods that we are proposing to use include those summer public events, a lot of information, videos, and ways to give feedback on our website. We have an active email list that is increasing in frequency. You may have all received a number of newsletters, and we want to make sure that people have current updates to what's going on. We're using our social media outlets to engage with people. Definitely inviting folks to individual and small group meetings, a lot of phone calls, and just trying to reach as many folks as we can who might have an interest in this. We have an online and print questionnaire in the works, but we don't want to publish that until we hear from you today. And then we'll be making the rounds to various neighborhoods and other groups to make presentations and have discussions with folks. Would like to also run advertisements in the daily and weekly newspapers. So all of that input will be cataloged and kept track of so that we can give it to you when we come back to you in September. So our next steps are really to have the discussion about which housing options you'd like us to develop further, talk about the public engagement piece, and then go execute that direction. That's our job over the summer, over the next 3 months, to execute that, and then come back to you with everything that we've heard and any recommendations that we have based on what we've heard. Your work session would be scheduled sometime in October to pick the multifamily strategies to then roll into the overall UGB adoption package, which would start by sending notice up to the state and then proceed through public hearings with the planning commissions and with you and the Board of Commissioners. Okay. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you. So I've got Mike in the queue. Anybody else?
Were we going to hear from
Oh, would you like to have
Ed?
that? Okay. Alana?
I usually like to jump in, but, you know.
Yes, George.
Okay.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for asking me up. I'm really here to answer questions you might have with regard to the process. We at DLCD have been, you could say, directly and indirectly involved in a reviewing capacity of the work the staff has done thus far, and I have to say it's a lot of really good work that has been done. And obviously, we're anxious to see you cross the finish line. It's been a long time, and I guess I don't want to retire before you do that. And so anyhow, you know, we've heard a lot of concerns being raised. So far, we think some of the proposals that the staff has brought forward has been good. You've done a lot of good technical work. You have identified a need for additional parks, schools, and employment land. We've reviewed that. We've actually worked with staff and looked over the UGB alternatives analysis. Your residential needs analysis appears to be fairly solid. Of course, we're sort of anxious at this point to see how you're going to meet that need, since that's required under Goal 10 and state statute. And at this point, I say any questions you might have about the process and the rules, I'd be happy to answer. Also, to let you know, too, you've actually been, to give you sort of another interesting point, you submitted what we call a post-acknowledgement plan amendment form, which says we're going to do it, that locked in your population forecast. And so we've been continuing to review that, and so that's actually established sort of one of the major parameters around the work that you do. And so at that point, you've actually started the process. You're sort of in the queue. We've been following it, and at this point, we don't see anything happening that when you do submit a revised plan amendment notice to us, which will identify the hearing dates and provide us with updated technical information, that there's any need to renotice or submit a new notice. It'll be basically a revised notice. So that's where you're at. So any questions?
Yes, so before we go back to questions to staff, I now entertain questions to Ed. And Mike, you're up and
Yeah, actually, I have both, but my first question was for Ed anyway, which is why I was happy he's up here. Underneath all of this work is the framework, the foundation under which all communities do their
land use planning, Senate Bill 100 kind of established a foundation of an idea for how we want to live in our state quite a lot of years ago, and how we want to plan for our future and our communities appropriately.
So I guess my first question would be, knowing that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we're still operating under what was previously the Metro UGP, which was Eugene and Springfield on our side of the freeway. And that was established in the early 80s. Do I have that right? Or it hasn't moved substantially for residential since the early 1980s?
Right.
And we're talking about now 15 years farther, because we've already gone through a few years of the 20-year part.
So that would put us to 2030. So here's my question. Would you say it's within keeping of the spirit of Senate Bill 100
that our community, considering its population changes over that window, has never moved its UGB in 50 years?
Again, it gets back to what, based upon studies and the Metro Plan, of course, it was originally adopted in the 80s as part of initial acknowledgement, and you've been in periodic review a couple of times. So the Metro Plan has been updated and easily went through periodic review. What they did is so up to, I think it's 2004 was the last time Metro Plan was adopted. It said to the end of that planning horizon, you had an adequate amount of land based upon the forecast population.
Forgive me for my interruption.
Yes.
I apologize. What I was asking was a subtly different question. I understand the technical aspects. What I was asking was the spirit of the law.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that we should grow incrementally over a period of time with the changes in population. Now, I'm sorry to say, have the change in population between 1980 and 2030 off the top of my head. Right. My guess is it's a pretty big number. If we're growing 1% a year over 50 years, that's at least 50% growth, if not more. So my point is, do you think it's within the keeping of the spirit of good, intelligent land use planning that we haven't moved the UGB for housing for residential within 50-year window?
Based on the information I've had, I'd say at this point, no, it is not.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I would say then to staff, and I know we're going to do another part with that, but I would say two things. Number one, I would like to keep all of our options open for what we might hear from the community about how we might move forward. I wouldn't think it's intelligent for us to limit down the scope of what we might hear from people before we ask them what they think. So I would be in favor of keeping all of the options on the table, most especially because it includes the one, in doing so, it would include the one that I think we need to be putting the most focus on. And it's that when we went through this process in the first place, at least George Polling and I know, maybe others, had very strong objection to the mix, to the 45-55 mix, that was inappropriate based on the window we were looking at, and it was too steep of a goal. And I think what we're seeing now is the result of that, is the difficulty we're having. And I guess I would ask staff, wouldn't it be true if we changed that mix right now as a part of the assumptions to 57-43, the problem would go away, or something like it? That's actually a question.
Yeah.
All right, I got it. Yep, we do have some preliminary analysis of what we would need to change the mix to take care of the multifamily deficit. But it's not 57, it's more like 64. And I would ask Ed to comment on that because it's increasing the proportion of single family above what we currently have in our community, which hasn't been done.
The department would not look favorably at that. You're asked in the intent of the goals and the guidelines and our rules, you're asked to incrementally increase your efficiency in the use of land. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things you have to prove when you go to expand an urban growth boundary, and to actually change the mix back to where you weren't even meeting your current mix we think, and I can't speak for the department or the commission, but more than likely end up with a remand saying that we didn't believe that you used your land efficiently.
Second round, please.
Yep, you got it. Chris, we're still questions for Ed.
This is. And Ed, I really appreciate you coming down. This is really helpful. And this is actually to follow on kind of with some of the concepts that Mike was bringing up. Robin said something earlier about kind of establishing the guardrails or the parameters within which we can work. We have a certain level of authority to do things in the city, but that's all governed by state law. than what the state would or would not look, as you say, favorably on or would approve. So I'm going to offer a hypothetical, and you can let me know whether that would operate within the guidelines. Let's say that it was the desire of many people in the city of Eugene to say, you know what, I like my single-family home with my big yard. Let's just make the urban growth boundary bigger to accommodate our desire to have our single-family homes with our big yards. And so we just make it bigger for that reason. And I'm hearing you say that the state would not necessarily look favorably on that.
That's correct. I mean, again, what we do is it goes back to what is your need, what is your needed housing, and we would look at what your current standards are, and I guess it would have to get back to, is doing that going to actually address the need that's been identified in the studies? And so there's no really way for me to say, yeah, we would think that's great or not. Typically, we don't see that done. So far, all of the UGB expansions I've been involved in, what we've seen actually is the single-family lots getting smaller. And that's just in terms of, one, trying to make them affordable, and other, to try and use land more efficiently.
Yeah, okay. So the notion, the goal, back to what Senate Bill 100 was to use the land more efficiently,
right,
and not just kind of spread out because you want to, but to use the land more efficiently. So that then leads to, there's my second question. Part of some of the conversations we've had here is, this is very complicated. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of things that I don't like. Why don't we just stop, not do anything, and just go, what are you going to do about it? What would the state do about it?
Well, that's an interesting question, and one we would hope that you would not entertain, because we don't want to be put in that position.
Right.
I did talk to staff, sort of got previewed that issue may come up. And like I say, one of the things that we've been doing is we've been monitoring the work you've done down here over the past few years. And in the course of monitoring that work, there's several things that we noted. One was that you had a need for additional employment land, and you had a need for additional schools and parks, and you have a need for additional residential housing in order to accommodate the 34,000 expected population. So we know you have a need. Now, the thing that you could say the can that hasn't been kicked yet, as far as we're concerned, that would cause us to actually take pause and maybe actually probably have to do something straight away, is that you actually haven't officially adopted any of those studies that provide that information. We know they're out there. We know the evidence is there. It's just that you haven't taken it to the next step. And one of the things the statute requires is, once you identify that you have a need, especially with housing, you have to address it. You have no choice in that regard. Now, with regard to your employment land and schools and that, while the rules do say you need to meet that need, you actually can do that in incremental steps. It's not like housing, which basically is you have a need, you meet it. And so in that case, what we would do is, when you would submit an adoption notice, for example, identifying the need, we would basically then probably take it to the committee, or actually, since you're not expanding UGB, we would probably appeal to LUBA saying they haven't amended their UGB to address the need. And LUBA has had a history of just then remanding it back to the city to complete your work. So that's sort of where we're at. Now, let's say you don't ever adopt anything. You just kind of go on. And I'm not an attorney, so first of all, I'm going to say
Sure.
This isn't legal advice. But when you look at the statute that precipitated you doing all this work, 197.304, one of the things that it required you to do is to establish a UGB. You're operating under and we've sort of let you operate under the old Metro Plan UGB for your side of the freeway, but you really don't have a Eugene-only UGB that you're required to have under 304. And you were also and basically then just establish it for residential. So you had to meet, the only thing the bill really said is establish a UGB that provides 20 years of land for residential development.
You're going to have to put the motion.
And so like I say, we know that there's a need, but at this point, you haven't done anything to address that need. So if you were just to stop, I would say that it looks like, on the face of it, that you're basically in violation of 197.304. It is one of our land use statutes, and some options that the commission could entertain, it's nothing I could entertain, would be, one, to initiate an enforcement order that would then direct the city to basically complete the work, to do what you need to do to comply with 304, which would be not necessarily address employment, schools, and parks, but to do something with regard to housing. And so that's one option. An option would also be, obviously, the first option would be to do nothing. We do nothing. So the other one would be that we initiate an enforcement order. Another would be that we could ask you to, or call you, drag you into periodic review. And in that case, then come up with a work program and have you work through, again, to complete the task that lays before you. So that's another option there. Another one would be a citizen, say the home builders could initiate a citizen-initiated enforcement order and request that you get the work done. Come to us with the evidence showing, I'll have to say, probably in this case it would be a pattern of decision-making that doesn't get you across the line. And then the commission would then respond to that. And then, let's see, and I wrote the fourth one. Finally, the other thing, too, that I could say that would really take it out of everybody's hands would be the original author of House Bill 3337 decides to do a legislative fix in 2017, and therefore, you're really fixed. So those are sort of the options I see that are out there, and obviously the one that we as staff would hope that you would do is continue on the path you're currently on. Most of the issues that you have are really policy issues that we do leave to the locals to decide, and then what we would do is look and see whether the results of those policy choices that you make end up complying with the applicable statutes.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Alan actually has a question for you, but I just wanted to call everybody's attention the time that we're at right now. And we have one other item we actually have to discuss on Nightingale Rest Stop before we leave today. So I'm aiming at 1 to switch, which means we have to sort of ramp up this conversation some. Okay, Alan.
And get towards a decision. Thanks, Ed. So would there be any problem with actually adopting both option A and option B for this and allowing individual circumstances, the developers, for instance, or the area, to choose between the two?
Well, not really. Yeah, because one of the things the option does is it fixes how you're going to accommodate the needed housing, and there's two different paths there. I would say if the idea was you wanted to accommodate, say, the one that would allow single family, then that would probably be in a R2 zone. That would be the one to go with. If you feel uncomfortable in not allowing or not restricting single family development there, I think the staff's put out, what some plausible alternatives are. Again, one of the things that we'll look at when it comes back before us is do we think that you can practically do this? And you'll also have to have the ordinances in place saying, here's how we're going to do it, and so we can implement it. And the other thing it'll have to all be done under clear and objective standards. So, those will be the things that we check. But I think to have two tracks, you end up with two different land-based assumptions, and it just isn't going to work. You really need to make a choice.
But if both can get you there, a combination of any of the two probably can get you there too.
It could, but that would be very hard to figure out, whether you actually got there or not.
Yeah, I actually tried to figure it out, and my head started to hurt.
So thank you, Ed, very much for your comments. And we're going to go back to the main queue.
So just to clarify, Ed, so you were suggesting then that the option that didn't preclude single-family homes, which would be, is the one to go with?
No, what I'm saying is we don't have a preference.
Oh.
But if that was you need to pick the preference. That's the local policy choice that ends up driving the end number. And I, for one, am not here to tell you how to do that. That's something that you folks have to wrestle out and do for yourself.
But your recommendation is
That's
to pick
what
one.
you the big bucks.
But your recommendation, all right, thanks. But your recommendation is pick one.
Pick one. That's correct.
I think we got down to $1.25 an hour.
Oh,
when we
did you?
finally figured out how much city councilors get paid.
I'll put into it, you get a raise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going back into the main queue, and George Polling is up.
Thank you. Actually, I just have one question for staff, and my comments kind of related to the question, and Mike kind of touched on the question I have. So we've been presented two options to consider, and of the two options, option B to me seems more logical. Option A would, the single-family zone so far, the land supply is already short, and that would no longer allow the single-family dwellings in the medium residential. So I'm not real favorable on that. And we had this discussion when we met last week, and I'm just getting it out to the rest of my fellow councilors. I prefer option B of the two that are presented. That will increase the needed density, but my big concern is that the higher density may make a lot so small that the market will not respond, leaving buildable land in the urban growth boundary undevelopable. What I'm trying to get across is I'm looking at it from a realistic viewpoint, and that at some time, folks are going to say, I don't want to build on that small of a lot, and that lot may go. So my recommendation is that we closely monitor the market and that we do a check back in 3 to 5 years. But my question now is, if we're taking an option out for public to look at, would that preclude a third option from being developed either during the public outreach or at the conclusion of the outreach? In other words, we don't want to limit, we're going to say this is our, I don't see the point of taking something out to the public if we're going to say here's the option that you have to consider, and then just say what do you want to hear from, you get the feedback from them, and then we vote on it. That makes no sense. So what I'm asking is, if we go out to this outreach, are we going to be open-minded about it and say, hey, Citizen Smith over here has a great idea that we didn't even realize we could do?
So the answer, George, is legally you are not precluded at all when you pick this up again in the fall from either choosing one of the options that went out for public comment or developing a completely new one. This is like your other decisions that you have made. You get to revisit if you want until you adopt the final formal package. So you can send out, and you're not, staff isn't asking you to choose between option A or option B. It's the recommendation is send out the tier 1 strategies, but if you get information back during this time that here's a great idea, absolutely the council can say you want to proceed with that one.
Okay. And then are you looking at what the council thinks is the preferred option, either option A or option B, or just say, yeah, these two options will be the starting point?
Right. We're not asking you to pick one today. We're asking to take the tier 1s out for both two things. Further development, so like turning them into code language, both option A and option B, if you think they're worth pursuing, need to be turned into actual code language. And that's the further technical work that we're talking about. For the public engagement, the tier 1 is our suggestion to focus on, but I agree we should not be limiting public comment in any way. If somebody has another idea, if somebody wants to comment on something else, yes. But what we're hoping to get from you today is clear direction on what you expect us to do from a technical standpoint, tier 1 or something else.
All right, so I'm okay with sending the two options out. I was just voicing my opinion based on the information I have at this time on what my preferred option is, but I'm also open if someone comes up with a better mousetrap, I'll buy it.
Okay, clear. Bless you, Alan. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say, I feel like we've been hearing recently that our community doesn't have a sufficient variety of housing options, and that first-time home buyers or folks seeking to live within a smaller, more affordable footprint aren't finding those options readily available for them. We just don't have the mix of housing that other communities might offer. So, I think these possible measures have the potential to address that very particular issue. I have not heard any desire from our community over the course of these conversations to sprawl out further beyond our current boundaries into our farmlands, into our wetlands, or other places we'd end up paving over if we expanded the UGB. I really think that's a non-starter for a majority of our community, and I think it's important to remind this council of that. And then I also think, I appreciate this work on behalf of staff, and I think, people can offer whatever comments they wish. They can come to, the booth and talk about things other than the UGB. I mean, that's the nature of our public input. So if folks really want us to consider other options beyond these Tier 1, they'll let us know. So I think that we don't have to fear that we're shutting people down by presenting these specific ideas. You talked about the idea of taking small lots out of consideration for these code amendments if we chose to go down this route. How do you define small lot versus larger lot?
We ran a couple of tests on that, and the one that looks to be the best fit is half an acre. So it's hard to describe how big half an acre is. It's right. But their developed lots are a lot smaller than that, like a quarter acre or smaller. So if we set the threshold at half an acre, virtually all of the already developed lots or vacant ones in neighborhoods that are already developed will fall out of that. And so that would exempt them from having to meet new density requirements or any new code requirements.
And then recognizing that this is a response to concerns, particularly from the South Willamette neighborhood and how that outreach occurred. Are we closing off our prior commitment or emphasis around development along transit corridors by moving in this direction?
Thank you for asking that question. No, absolutely not. We are definitely not recommending abandoning our compact development pillar or strategy. It's a critical component of the pillars and of Envision Eugene. It's pretty widely supported. The devil's in the details, of course. So we are saying that based on the discussions around South Willamette, it doesn't appear legally possible to depend on the results of those future planning efforts in order to adopt the urban growth boundary. So with an unmet need as small as 1,600 homes, we've presented some alternative ways of doing that. But at the same time, we need to still work with communities and corridor neighborhoods around the city to get that process right. And we're very committed to that. I can't wait to go, get into the different communities that really need to have a plan of their own. But this allows us to move forward with the UGB.
So in a sense, it gives us a fallback plan if we go out to those area plannings for those corridor and they take longer, they're more complicated, or we're unsuccessful in some way, we would still have this other capacity to meet our required state mandate.
Yes, it'll take the pressure off for any neighborhood area planning effort. It'll take the pressure of putting a certain number of homes into that plan away.
Okay. Well, I would support moving these Tier 1 strategies out for public comment. I think, we do need to hear from folks about some of the particulars here and what their preference is. In terms of public outreach, I think your plan is pretty good. I will note that I believe the Whitaker Block Party is happening the first weekend of August, and I think that would be a great place for you guys to be. And then I wonder if there's opportunity to use the EARS public service announcement process for letting folks know about meetings and such. Thank you.
George.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, my concern kind of mirrored what Councilor Slyrat just said. I don't see any mention here, and I guess this is attachment B, of the multifamily housing options. I assume most of these will probably be discussed in the community engagements. I mean, that's the idea, or they will come up in conversation.
That all of the strategies would come up? Yeah, so again, what we're hoping is that we get clear direction on which ones to further develop from a technical standpoint, but use the whole list in our public engagement, solicit comment on that.
Well, I think that I think that the strategy of increasing residential density through mixed-use development along key transit corridors should be included in what, on the same level of a Tier 1 strategy to be discussed. Just because it kind of fell apart on South Willamette, that wasn't the reason. I think had it been limited to a mixed use on Willamette Street, I think there may have been a better outcome. It seemed like the problem, at least the way I kind of interpret it, came when you could call it mission creep maybe, and rezoning, a lot of the affordable homes, medium density homes, and that sparked the neighborhood opposition. But I think even most of the neighbors were amenable to the idea of mixed use along the corridor, not several blocks in on either side. So I'm going to make a motion to add that to the. I mean, I'll do it right now, but when it becomes motion time,
We'll put the motion on the table.
to add that at that time as something that I think should be discussed in the community outreach, because I can, just off the top of my head, I can think of several areas, River Road, there's all kinds of places. West 11th is ripe, and there's plenty of areas out there where that would be a useful strategy, even South Willamette, but, if it was more contained. So, thank you.
You'll wait.
Yeah, well, I'll wait. Yeah, I was thinking about, maybe it was time to add all this some other things in there, but listening to the discussion previously, I've decided not to do that and just kind of limit it to that one thing.
Could I ask a clarifying question about that? So when you get to your motion, is the strategy you're recommending be included in Tier 1 on this list? And it would help me know which one it is.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not. This was what puzzled me a little bit. And I know you kind of ran into a stone wall on South Willamette, but the concept, was recommended by the Community Resource Group, and council accepted the idea. I mean, it's a wonderful idea.
Sure.
And I don't see it listed here.
Right. And
Or
I can
anywhere
explain
else
why
in
it's
the-
not listed as a line item that says area planning. What actually increases the efficiency of the land use is the development incentives. And so it's not changing zoning necessarily. If we change the plan designation, then that is on the list. Increase plan designation along corridors is on the list. That adds capacity. If we add MUPD or other development incentives, and they're in the efficiency incentive column here, that adds capacity. But those are not the only goals of an area planning process that we intend to keep doing under the spirit of the pillar. Does that make sense?
In a way, it does, yeah. But I think it should be spelled out. I mean,
Okay.
the Tier 1 strategies are spelled out pretty specifically, and I just think it should be added in there as a specific strategy, because I think it's very important. I mean,
Thank
it's
you, George.
implied in all these other things, but it's not.
The one other thing to know about that is that whatever strategy you do want to include in the UGB adoption package would have to be adopted. So if there were an area plan like West 11th, or, it would have to be an action that is adopted at the time that we adopt the UGB.
Okay, so I'm going to, Mike's in the queue, and then I'm going to ask Alan to put a motion on the table. Mike?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to ask the mayor to put me in the queue after the motion is made for an amendment and say that my guess is we're going to be asked to accept Tier 1. There are a number of those items in Tier 2 that I believe should be a part of what we take out to the public and that are viable alternatives. The analysis that you have here in the two columns, I appreciate. The impact on the deficit being the first one. Several of those Tier 2 have high impact, but are rated low in their technical feasibility. It's my opinion that some of those are political feasibilities and not technical feasibilities. And so I recognize the staff's expertise in technical field, but I think some of those are political calculations.
And as a result, I think we might want to allow the public to inform us on whether or not some of those Tier 2 options are worthwhile to consider. Thank you. And if you'll put me in the queue for an amendment, I'd appreciate that.
Motion on the table?
So a clarifying question about the motion. It just mentions Tier 1. So when we go out to public involvement and have that conversation, are Tier 2 and Tier 3 completely off the table?
We could make that more clear in the motion. No, I don't think they should be off the table, but that's up to you.
Yeah, I don't either. So, I was thinking the same thing. So in that case, would we specify Glenn Tier 1 in the motion, or just options in attachment C?
My suggestion is you change the motion to read, I move to direct staff to focus on Tier 1 strategies, but also accept comments on other strategies or Tier 2 strategies, for accommodating multifamily housing as outlined in attachment C.
Okay, that's my motion.
All right. Second. Moved and seconded. Councilor Brown?
I'd like to include discussion of increasing multifamily housing along transit corridors, mixed-use areas. It's not specifically listed if that could be added. I understand it would have to be, the airplanes would conduct and everything for the drill down was out. That would really split down.
There's like he would that as part of the motion.
If staff will answer the question, whether or not that act is incorporated in Tier 3. George wants to be specific.
Yeah. Well, the redesignation is an efficiency measure. That's the first one under Tier 2. And the incentives are listed under Tier 3.
So we would, though it's not specific. George wants to.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think one way to answer that question is to say that the actual actions that you would have to take, the things that council would actually adopt, either before or at the time of UGB adoption, those actions that would have an impact on the multifamily housing need, that would actually generate more housing potentially, those are all on the list. So area planning is a broader conversation that results in those kinds of actions. Yeah, I guess it means it's somewhat redundant to say area planning because of the things that you would have to do are already included.
Well, he was talking about specifically about mixed use, higher density, and transportation corridors.
Right.
So I think another way to ask that question, is there any harm in doing that?
No, absolutely. I didn't see any
Then
harm
I'll
in doing
accept that
that.
as a friendly amendment.
Thank you. The reason is it's not specifically mentioned, but many other things are specifically mentioned.
Right.
And that's not.
One more and then we're going to vote.
Yeah, just a clarifying question. So you're going to be presenting in all the public forums Tier 2 options in equal measure to Tier 1 options, but just designated by staff as their preference between Tier 1 and Tier 2?
We have a lot more information on Tier 1, and what I'm hearing in this discussion is those are the ones we should focus on. That's the motion. So you're free to give us direction to develop more information about these Tier 2 strategies, but right now we have...
So they won't be equally presented to the public?
They'll all be presented for public comment, but the amount of analysis that's gone into them is different. That's why they're grouped into the tiers the way they are.
They're allowed to talk about it, but they don't have data on it.
Yeah, and just to keep in mind here, when we talk about area planning, the analysis that goes into actual area planning, we've seen what that looks like, and that takes a number of years. It's very complicated. There's a lot of conversations with the community involved with that. So under the heading of area planning, that analysis would have to be completed, i.e. those discussions worked through and all of that before you would know what the result of that action would be on the actual housing need, if that makes sense. So you'd have to go through the whole area planning process in a part of the community to know if it would make a difference at all.
Mine's a more specific question in regard to several of these options. For example, it's putting the appropriate question before the public about what kind of answers you're gathering. One of the problems that one of the jokes that's often made is that Eugene hates the idea of sprawl. The only thing it hates worse is density. And so that's kind of a false choice. But what it does set up is the reality that sometimes that is a choice. And what I'm trying to say is I want to make sure that we're giving the public all the actual choices, and some of them are embedded in Tier 2 and not embedded in Tier 1. And what I don't want to do is have us presenting to the public a limited selection of choices that avoids the tougher ones, perhaps, that are listed in Tier 2.
City Manager.
What I would say, there are a couple things in Tier 2, for example, housing mix and whether or not to increase the UGB to accommodate unmet needs. Council could give new direction on those, which I then think we could go out and do more technical analysis on those. Up to this point, the direction from council has been, this is a specific housing mix by policy, and this is a specific whether we're going to expand the UGB for this type of housing or not. And therefore, it feels like, for example, expanding the UGB to accommodate the unmet need would be a new policy direction from the council to move in that direction. And I think that's why you're hearing some of the hesitancy in some of the responses.
I understand entirely. What I'm saying, though, is the public has never been honestly and truly, in my opinion, presented with this choice that if we're not, because on its own, nobody wants to do that. But if the cost of never doing that is something they don't like even more, then having that actual understanding of that choice is the part I'm trying to get to. Honest information in front of the public. So I don't want us to be saying, oh yeah, I guess you could do this too, even though we don't think that's a good idea. That I really want to avoid that option, presenting it to the general public for our input. I get the UGB question is a fairly answered one with this council, but the housing mix one I think we got wrong, and I think it's an easier fix that doesn't require some of the backflips we're talking.
And what I would say is we would need some pretty specific question about some of those issues, because I would be uncomfortable with the staff doing a lot of work, presenting information in a way that potentially is revisiting a council policy in which the majority of the council doesn't want us to revisit. If you'd like us to, absolutely we will do that. And that's just my concern. That's just my concern.
Well, I guess then I guess that makes me a no vote, unfortunately. I would like to support this, but I would want the public to have the best kind of information to say at the end of the day, we gave a complete set of honest information to the public, and this is the input we got. I would hate to say, well, we gave them a limited selection of information, and based on the limited selection we gave them, we got back an answer, so this must be what they want. That won't be honest.
And I know you want to move on, so I'm going to be very short.
Two more people.
The little bit of the nuance I would say is we will present the list. The question is the amount of information or analysis that goes with that. And so people can still talk about changing the housing density. What we're not going to do is put together a whole big package of information that talks about all the various options. So that would be the nuanced difference, I think.
Okay. All right.
All right, we got Alan, and then we got a vote.
So just to rephrase that, the way I understand this, the way the motion is that when we present this, we'll have specific numbers and data about Tier 1 options. But when someone says, what if we change the number of housing per household, number of persons per household from 5 to 4, you're not going to be able to say, then this is what happens, correct?
Right.
Or any of these other ones. You're not going to be able to specifically quantify the
Right, we
impacts.
haven't done that level of analysis.
Because you've been focusing on one.
Right.
That information will come back to the council and sort of
Right, but that means that maybe some of those surface, and then we can, when we come back to council, we could then have a conversation about figuring out exactly which ones need to be analyzed.
I would say under the current direction for the majority of council, unless someone raises a new motion or new direction, your direction is already said. This is the amount of multiple and single and all of those things. Those are decisions you've already made that they're moving past and forward with. So, all right. So let's vote on this. The motion's on the table.
With the friendly amendment.
With the friendly amendment. All those in favor, please indicate.
Could you read it again for clarity? I apologize.
Move to direct staff to focus on Tier 1 strategies, but accepting comments on Tier 2 strategies, and I think I got this right, George, a higher density strategy along transit corridors for accommodating multifamily housing as outlined in Attachment C for further development and public engagement.
Okay. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor and none in opposition. It passes. Thank you. So,
One more.
Motion on that.
okay.
I move to direct staff to move forward with public engagement activities for the UGB adoption package as described in Attachment F.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay. All those in favor, please indicate. 6 in favor and in opposition, 1 passes. Okay. Thank you very much. So, going to move rapidly into the next discussion, which
And I'll
is...
ask Mia to introduce the topic around the Nightingale Rest Stop.
Okay.
Hi, all. So as you know, we've been in conversations with Lane County because they're currently hosting 2 rest stops at their location on MLK at the Behavioral Health Facility. That agreement has been subject to a couple of extensions recently and currently is set to expire on Friday, July 22nd. As you might remember, our agreement with them was that we would maintain our lease at that location for 6 months. Last winter, NHS transferred to another site for a 6-month period during the winter, which has been our agreement with the county all along. So today we're here to propose a property that the county has offered to NHS and to the city as an alternate location for the next 6-month period, and I'm going to pass these around, the map around. This is a property located at Roosevelt in North Danabo, and so Roosevelt is the street that runs across the top of this map. It's on county property and also ODOT property. The property lines that you see on this map aren't completely accurate. Our survey staff went out and looked at this property and found that a large portion of the rest stop, as we're proposing it to be sited on this, at this particular location, falls on ODOT property. The county is in the process of seeking a release of that property right now, and so today we'd be asking for your approval of this site pending the release from ODOT. There are a couple of other things related to this site that we want to bring to your attention. It was purchased with road funds, county road funds, and so as they did last winter, because the NHS was on a road fund property, they are asking that we pay rent for that location. Last year we were working with funds that NHS provided. At this time they don't have funds that they're able to provide, and so the city would be compensating the county in the amount of roughly $750 a month, so $4,500 for the 6-month period. We haven't, as you know, we haven't previously used city funds on a rest stop property, and that's why we're bringing that to your attention. Another option would be, first I should say, when we started conversations to find an alternate site for NHS with the county several months ago, staff in the city manager's office conducted an extensive search of our properties, the properties that the city owns, and given the current parameters that council has approved for rest stop sites, we don't have any properties that qualify. And so another alternative to looking at this property and approving this site, depending on the ODOT release, would be that staff can bring back properties next week that are city-owned properties if you're willing to consider relaxing some of the current ordinance requirements. So we've got a couple of options.
Hey, I've got Clara, Mike, George Polling, and George Brown, and Alan in the queue. I feel compelled to say, first of all, because I think it's important for the public, that the experience that's been had with Nightingale and their current property has been a good experience, that they've been very responsible in how that property has been used. It's been very helpful to people who need a lot of help. and they've done a terrific job of it. And so there is no, there's no public safety issues or health issues or anything. They've done a very good job. What we have to resolve is trying to have them maintain a place to be because of the direction of the county. So I just wanted to make clear that this isn't, the move is not because of any problem with Nightingale. It is a move because that's a decision that the county has made that they need to move them off that property. So with that, Claire.
Thank you. Thanks for, Mayor, for affirming the great result that we've had from our rest stop program, and its really low impact on nearby neighbors and the benefit that it provides to the folks who stay at the rest stops. In terms of this particular site, whose ward is it in terms of city council?
Councilor Pryor's.
Okay. And is there any nearby residential? It doesn't look like it from this picture.
No, there are no residences immediately adjacent. There are some businesses. And so we haven't reached out to them yet with respect to not receiving council direction yet. But once we do, we would start outreach.
Okay. And, I think it's rather disappointing that the county wants to charge us rent. I can't imagine this is going to have a huge impact on their bottom line. But setting that aside, so we, in our recent budget, allocated $25,000 for our rest stop program. Would those funds be available to pay that rent?
Do you want to answer that? Or?
Sure. So as I understand it, the budget as approved by the council is contingent upon marginal beginning working capital being available in December. And so until we know the outcome of the first supplemental budget, those funds are not available.
So what we would really essentially be doing is borrowing against those monies.
So that would, and would you want that to be included in the motion?
Well, I think I'm not sure what legally needs to be a part of this that says if we enter into this lease, we will have the financial obligation.
Okay.
And so then it's a matter of where we get the dollars. Our intent would be is those dollars are actually paying for this. It's just as a timing issue of cash flow.
Okay. So your intention, if council approves this site and all the other things work out, you pay that lease and then you'd backfill from that $25,000. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Before I call on Mike, I did want to make the comment that it's my understanding that land that is purchased as a
road fund,
they don't have a choice. They are by law have to charge for it. Just wanted to, yes, correct. So I just want to be sure.
Thank you.
That, yes, I wanted to be fair about that.
That's helpful.
Okay, Mike.
If you could, Mayor or Glenn, help me understand that better. They have to charge us for it specifically? And let me clarify on that question. I am absolutely in favor of the work that this organization has been doing, and I think unless I'm mistaken, I was in favor of the idea of them having the space they do. And I'm fine with the idea of, and in favor of, the work being done on properties that are appropriate. But we've done so allowing other organizations to step into the need and serve without it being a drain on city budget, because what we're saying is we want to work well with those who volunteer to help those in need. One of the things that's been said over and over and over and over again in that process is this isn't a Eugene only problem. This isn't only people from the city of Eugene that participate in the activities of the site. There are people that are from Springfield. It's a county-wide problem. It's the discussion all the time. And so I'm a little unclear how it becomes a financial problem or a financial responsibility of the city of Eugene to serve people who are, as we've all discussed,
from all parts of the county and frankly other parts of the country. So why is it that we have to pay the county according to them? Why is it us as opposed to someone else?
So there's both the legal answer to that question and a policy answer. The legal answer is the county
because they purchased the property with road fund dollars, and the property would then be used for a non-road fund purpose, the road fund needs to be reimbursed.
And the county can't pay them with their own dollars?
Hold on. So what I just said is my legal answer. The policy answer is there's nothing that says who has to pay. It could be the city, it could be the county, it could be an anonymous donor, it could be NHS. There's nothing that legally requires that it be the city of Eugene. The county may, assuming that they're not reimbursing themselves, the county may want the money to come through us because the lease is with us. And I haven't thought about it. It may be because of that the money would need to come through us, but it doesn't mean it has to come out of the city's general fund. That's a policy question for the council.
I'm not in favor of us. I'm in favor of the idea of allowing underutilized land in such a way, under the constraints of the discussions we've had before. I'm not in favor of us beginning a new precedent of paying for others' opportunity to do so when there are other alternatives for how we might move forward with letting this happen. So I guess my answer to this vote will be no for today, although I'm in favor of the work and what they're doing. But the manner in which it's presented to us is not the right way to do it, in my opinion.
George Poling.
Thank you. Yeah, I had some questions about the rent also, and I still have some questions, but they're not going to be able to be answered here. John, in the email that you sent us earlier this morning, or yesterday, I guess, sorry, I see three glaring differences in what we're proposing, the city, and what the county is looking for. You know, one of them is the $25,000 down payment. What was the logic, thinking behind that being suggested by the county council?
As far as I know, that's no longer a part of the lease, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, on that. So that's not a part of the current lease.
Well,
George, the reason why they raise that is they're concerned that there will be costs that ultimately tie to the rest stop that they would then be on the hook for. And so what they have said, since we objected to making a down payment, they have said, okay, we'll come up with a different way that ensures that the county will not be left having to incur costs because this rest stop is located that location. We haven't come up with that alternative yet, but they have removed the requirement that it actually be a $25,000 down payment.
So then, in the email that you, John, sent to the county administrator, it says to pay $700 a month and hold the county harmless for any site improvements. Is that what you're talking about? Is that what Glenn's talking about, or is that something different?
A couple different issues here. So there may need to be some site improvements to make the property accessible and safe. The county is saying that needs to be a city cost or somebody's cost other than the county cost. The other thing about the hold harmless is the county originally was going to decide what improvements needed to be made and wanted to require the city to reimburse us or reimburse them for those. What we said is, if what you're concerned about is safety, we can figure out what we think needs to happen in order to make the site safe, and we will hold you harmless if we get it wrong. So that's where the hold harmless comes in.
And then the discrepancies or the differences between the maximum number or the number of people allowed, the difference between the county, they're saying 12, is that right? And our ordinance says 15 to 20. Has that been worked out also?
I don't think that's completely worked out. That's a piece that we would still be working on over the next couple of days with the county.
As well as the startup date? I understand the situation, and I sympathize with the fact that CSS can't get started until after the first of the year. But I'm concerned that might present a problem. If we can't meet that October 1st, and also an agreement can't be reached between the county and the and the city as far as the numbers, is that going to be a deal breaker for this agreement?
Well, and, I'll answer two ways. One, which is, as Mia mentioned earlier, do you want us to bring back alternative sites next week, as that it would require you to flex some of your previous policy? And so we're happy to do that as backup to this particular piece. And what I would want to say is that that the intent when NHS located at the Behavioral Health Services, the intent was that they would find their own property at some point, and there was some time on that, and that just hasn't happened. NHS has not found their own property, and so the county has extended it a couple of times, and we're trying to figure out how to make all these pieces come together, and I think people's intent is good in all of this, and so we're just trying to work out the details. And so I don't know if they're deal breakers or not, I guess is what I would say, that the specific numbers. From our perspective, the council has an ordinance in place around the rest stop. If we're responsible for that, if we have a lease with the county, our position would be is we get to manage that based on the city's ordinance, and we would want to do that. And if we can reach a lease agreement, that would be a great outcome from our perspective. If we're not able to, then if we want to have a backup, we would want to come back to the council with those and ask the county to, extend that lease for at least another week for the city for the council to make a decision one way or another.
Well, I do very much appreciate the fact that the county has kind of stepped up and started working with us on addressing this overall issue, and I just don't want to see that cooperation break down because of some minor differences in what we're doing, and I certainly hope that the city can continue to work with the county on addressing this issue, and that we can work through these differences. And also, I do, like Mike was saying earlier, I do have some concerns about where that money is coming from. I realize that we did commit the money to address the homeless issue, but pending the supplemental budget. Now, I've been on the council, this is my 14th year, and I don't remember any supplemental budgets ever being turned down. But I do have a little bit of hesitation there without knowing for sure that that's where the money is coming from.
George Brown.
Thanks, Mayor. So how many people are at Nightingale right now, currently? Thank you. At this location, where's the nearest transit stop, nearest bus stop?
At this current location, it's
Just
less than
right
a...
there. Okay,
right.
that's pretty close. Yeah, all right. And this is Danebo. Okay, and Roosevelt. All right. And how do the folks at Nightingale feel about this site?
So this site came forward from the county late last week, and without having been here first, we haven't actually had a conversation with them about how this site will work for them operationally.
I see. Okay. And then I imagine the county would not be totally cruel and heartless and not extend some kind of grace period of 10 days, a couple of weeks, whatever, until we can work all this out. I can't imagine them doing that. Yeah, maybe, rather than just approving it right now, I think we need to hear from the folks at Nightingale, see if they like the spot, if that'll work for them. And I think we should look at the city's list of properties and see if we want to bend the rules a little bit on any one of them. I think that might be the way to proceed here. Otherwise, I would be willing to approve this, but and the expenditure and everything today, except I would like to hear from Nightingale and maybe look at other options.
I'm going to ask for somebody to put a motion out to extend the time.
Move to extend the meeting 10 minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. Okay, everybody? Okay. George, you through?
Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate something that the mayor said, which was Opportunity Village Eugene and the rest stops have really been, the pilots, in my mind, have been very successful. All of those issues and problems that people thought were going to materialize really have not. And Opportunity Village is actually, by the neighbors' own accounts, a good neighbor, and the rest stops have been relatively free from the problems that that a lot of people feared. Also, I think it's of note that I was on the HSC for a long time, and the studies that we showed had done, I don't remember the exact number, but it showed that high 90% of the people that are getting the services from HSC are actually people from here. There's very few people from outside this area. So it's not true that people are coming here to get these services. They're local people. What is the business across the street in Kitty Corner from this? And have they been contacted, and what was their response?
No, they have not been contacted. So again, what we traditionally have done with each of the rest stops is come seek council approval, and then upon your approval, we start outreach so that you're the first to know. And there, let's see, directly across where you see all of those trucks, there's a budget truck rental and then Pape Machinery.
Is Kitty Corner?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, Kitty Corner, I believe those might be, that's a residential area.
Okay. Where it says 504, lot 504.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we should talk to them before we move forward with this, as well as Nightingale. I like that idea as well. You also mentioned that if we were to relax our standards, we might be able to identify some city-owned property. Can you remind us what the standards are and what we would be looking at relaxing to get to some sites?
Glenn, do you want to answer that?
The primary standards are not in a residential area, which is not a defined term, but it basically means generally R1 property, but if you happen to have C1 property, a bunch of apartments, that would still be considered a residential area. You could have R1 property that is just completely open space for, acres and acres and acres, so that could qualify. Your policy also includes not in parks. There may be some undeveloped parkland that's not near any residential areas that might be able to host a rest stop for a short period of time.
So if we relax those two standards, we might be able to come up with a couple of potential projects or potential sites. Okay, I'd be interested in seeing that before we approve this. So given all that, what's the action that you need from us today to move forward?
So although it's inconsistent with what you just said, my recommendation is that you actually, if you're willing to approve this site, assuming that the comments that you would be getting back would work for you, that you actually approve it today. We can come back to you on Monday with alternatives if you decide that you're willing to relax your standards a little bit. And then before anybody would locate to this site, because there's going to need to be some site work done, we can come back to you on Monday and say, okay, here are a couple other sites. The county, by the way, has extended the lease at the behavioral health site twice or 3 times already. I don't know that they would extend again for another couple of weeks. If you approve an alternative and say we just need time, I think it's more likely that they extend because they say, oh, they're actually plan to move people somewhere. So my recommendation to you is that you actually, again, if you're willing to approve this site, if there are no alternatives, yes, is that you approve a motion that authorizes the site and authorizes up to $4,500. And I could, if you're interested, when you're ready, I can give you a motion to do that.
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable doing that now because there's a lot of unanswered questions that we could, I would be willing to entertain that on Monday, but I would like to see, I would like to have Nightingale talk to, I'd like to have the businesses talk to, I would like to see what the alternative sites would be in particular. And with that information, then I'd be willing to move forward. But at this point, that's not where I think we should be going unless there's some overriding timing issue that can't wait until Monday.
The timing issue is, suppose on Monday you decide there are, maybe there's one of these other relaxed criteria sites that could work. Then there's going to be more investigation of that without any definitive time as to when that site might get approved, I think you're going to hear from the county. Like I say, the county has extended several times. I think the commissioners are interested in either the city. I mean, we have a lease right now that says people need to be off by Friday. I don't think the county is going to kick them off on Friday, especially if you indicate that you intend to take action or have taken action, that there is a plan. But if all you do today is to say, bring us back more information on Monday, and there's no particular timeline, I think we will be hearing from the county, and that's your choice. I just want you to know that I expect that we will receive terse letters, emails, both legal and non-legal, from the county.
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of letters from the county recently. But if we said that if we were saying we're going to make a decision on Monday, then you think that would be different?
You're asking me to read the tea leaves of the county. Yes. I think if the county knew that there was going to be absolutely an alternative on Monday, that they're not going to kick anybody off on Friday, I have nothing to base that on other than that's just my guess. But remember, there still will need to be, I mean, you're talking about outreach. If we bring you other sites on Monday, you may be saying the same thing. Okay, well, now we need to do outreach with Nightingale, and we need to do outreach with the neighborhood, and so you're not going to be willing to approve that site until some of these things happen. There may need to be site improvements that happen there, and that's where I think the county is going to say, there's just no end to this. It just keeps getting extended.
I guess I would add to that also that the city manager has been in extended conversation with them for a long time over trying to find a place to move. So this isn't like we didn't start this conversation yesterday. It's been something they've been working hard on. This is as far as they've been able to come, and you have a decision, I think, in front of you about whether you want to take the steps to kind of say, yeah, let's move forward and see if we can make this one work. And by the way, let's look and see if we got anything of our own that we could bring to the table with some more flux. I think you could do both of those things and send a message that your intention is to do something.
Well, and sort of adding to that, Mayor, if you could approve this one with the direction that staff continue to look for those relaxed sites, and if we find something, whether it's next week or in 3 weeks or 5 weeks, at that point, we just tell the county we're terminating the lease early, and people are moving to a better site.
Yep. All right, I've got Betty and George and Mike in the queue. Betty.
I thought Claire, sorry. I'm desperate to speak.
Thank you. So if we vote for this, we're committing some money, right?
If you vote for this, you would be authorizing the manager to spend up to $4,500, assuming that we actually could work out the rest of the lease terms and that ODOT actually grants written approval. So, yes, assuming that we get those other things worked out.
And then how much money is the county contributing?
There's no contribution from there's no direct financial contribution from the county for this property.
This is it's a county problem. Actually, I think it's a state problem, but I don't think it's just a Eugene problem, and I don't believe that all the people who need help came from Eugene. They're in Eugene now, but it is a bigger problem than ours, and I don't understand why the county doesn't feel they have as much responsibility, at least as much responsibility as we do. That's all. Thank you.
George.
Yeah, I think we should go ahead and approve this today for the good reasons stated in advance. We can look at alternate sites later. The site needs improvement. We can hear from Nightingale. But I think to move all the other things forward, we should go ahead and approve the idea today. And yes, we're spending money and the county's not. I don't really care. I mean, there's 19 people that have shelter now, and I don't want to see them lose their home. So They just have to move. And so I will approve a motion to proceed today. Thank you.
Mike,
I think, Claire, I'll take it.
and then I've got Claire.
Isn't this a board decision you're talking about when you're talking about the negotiation? A county board decision?
The board has, county council met with the board in executive session right after your joint meeting.
The board decision, you're saying that, we need to act now because the board might do something between now and the board's not going to meet between now and Monday.
The board has already given direction, I believe, to the county administrator and county council as part of that executive session, whenever your joint session was with them that night.
They gave a direction to evict unless?
I don't know.
Well, like I said, I'm entirely in favor of us doing the appropriate thing to help, but it's being done right now in exactly the wrong way. I agree with Alan. I agree with some of the things that Betty said. So I'm trying to parse that. And I don't know isn't helping me make that decision very well. I don't mean to be confrontational. I'm just saying, so you're telling me the county said, unless you guys do this, we're just going to say goodbye.
I have not heard that from Steve Mokrahysky. What he hasn't said, if we don't come to agreement at this moment that they're planning to, he doesn't want to move the Nightingale people off the site and onto the street. I don't think
well, the
anybody
difference
wants
between
to do
Friday
that.
and Monday on the weekend, none of them will actually be there. I'd like us to have better information to make a better decision on this than I have right now. So I would like very much for people not to obviously be evicted, obviously. But the decision we're being asked to make is with insufficient information, so I'm going to say no until I have it because it's a responsibility to make a responsible decision. But I can also then assure those who are watching our meeting that I'd also want to speak with members of and friends at the county to ensure that they don't kick people off come Friday, because that's obviously a bad idea, and I'm actually very comfortable with the manager's capacity to explain the situation to Steve too.
Claire?
Yeah, I don't think it's the county administrator who needs an explanation. The county has already extended their stay. I think there's a real sense of urgency here, and I appreciate Councilor Brown's comments. I heard very directly from one county commissioner about his extreme frustration that we had not found a location yet. And I assured him that our staff was working in good faith to get this done. So I think it's very important that this council take action today to signal our intent to at least look to see if the site is viable. Staff needs us to approve the site in order for them to begin their work. That's how it's worked in the past when we've had rest stops come before us. The site that we approved in Whitaker on Railroad and First, we approved it and then staff did due diligence. They decided it wasn't an appropriate site. That's how our process has been set up. So I'm a little confused by councilors saying they need more information before approving this site. I understand there's some other implications here that weren't there with that site, but that's how we've done the process before. I'm fine with learning about other city properties and what might work if we considered a relaxed ordinance, but I think we need to take action today on this site. If it doesn't work out, if nearby properties owners have major objections, if the site isn't workable for a Nightingale Health Sanctuary, then we'd have those other options to look at. As far as the budget allocation, at the Budget Committee, we had a very specific conversation about this. Councilor Clark, you were not, you didn't participate in those.
I'm aware.
And my feeling is this is exactly the kind of thing that I wanted that money to be allocated for, where we had a potential site, there was some cost involved. I had been thinking, of divvying that money up at about $5,000 a site was kind of what I had in my mind, so this kind of fits perfectly. So I really hope that this council will approve this site today and allow staff to go forward with their work.
Go ahead, the motion now.
I move approval of this site as described and authority to spend up to $4,500 and for staff to bring back city sites with relaxed criteria for future discussion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor and none in opposition. It passes.
But I don't appreciate the conversations.
Thank you.